Dr. Hoodbhoy, for joining the interview. Much appreciated. When you think of India in the eyes of the world, what are the two or three words that jump to your mind?
Huge, diverse, and progressing.
Okay. And when you think of Mr. Modi as a person and as a prime minister, what are the few words that come to your mind?
Ah, efficient, clever, cunning, and divisive.
Okay. Thank you. Now, you have been referred to as a prominent nuclear scientist, well-known author, columnist, and human rights activist. Some have even called you the traitor of Pakistan for your frank and fearless views on the future direction for Pakistan. How would you like to be known as, and what would you like to be known for?
Well, I am certainly not a patriotic Pakistani in the sense of being a flag waver and somebody who salutes the flag. But I think that wherever one is born, one owes to the people certain things. The fact that I was able to get a good education, that I was able to spend a good life, that was made possible by the people around me. And so I would like to pay back that debt. I would like to be remembered as someone who didn't forget what he got from society.
Okay, thank you. Now I come to your book, Pakistan Origins, Identity, and Future. In the book, you answer many questions, including was the partition of India worth the price? Did Mr. Jinnah really have a vision for Pakistan? Who are Pakistanis, and what exactly is a self identity? Can you please summarize the book, sir, in your own words?
Well, what's badly needed in Pakistan is a narrative of our history which is truthful, which is accurate, and which is comprehensive. So I start the book from thousands of years ago, well before the Muslims came to the subcontinent, and begin with the question of identity, whether there was actually a coherent Hindu identity, as is claimed today. And if I look at the evidence, I don't find that. Then come the Muslims, and they came as invaders, and they came initially to conquer. They were temple destroyers in the beginning, but they started to get used to the new land and they then became part of it. Now, that part is being contested in India, and in Pakistan, it is seen as an extension of Muslim glories. And I have differences with both narratives. I think it is the British who's coming which made the difference between Hindus and Muslims grow. And in my book, I look particularly at how education, the fact that Muslims were reluctant to adopt modern education, science, and so forth, that led to their being disadvantaged. And then I look at how the idea of the two nation theory arose and how it was it was solidified by the ideologues on both sides of the divide. There was on the one side Sayyid Ahmad Khan, Allama Iqbal, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and on the other side Savarkar, and then later Golwalkar and others, Lala Lajpat Rai, etc. And so these need close examination, looking at how political events influenced people's thinkings. That I think is very important. And so a good portion of my book is built on the issue of how did the two nation theory develop? And then, of course, the question is, could it have been otherwise? And I think it could have been otherwise.
Hmm. Okay. Now I'll pick on the notion of two nation theory, and you argue in the book that Pakistan is more than religion, and if it were to survive and prosper, the two nation theory has to be abandoned in favor of more inclusive identity. That's been the kind of underlying proposition that you have always made in all of your writings and interviews. Uh, but with religion and military rule dominating Pakistan's history post independence, do you think it's going to be seriously heard, if not acted upon?
Well, actually, we should have learned from 1971 that religion is not a strong enough glue to hold a disparate nation together. Unfortunately, Pakistan did not learn that. It still has military rulers which believe that sheer force of arms is sufficient to keep this whole country together. But you see, now things are beginning to change a little bit. Now that Pakistan is in deep distress, you see that even the military establishment has to reach out to the political leaders, and of course, the political leaders aren't independent of the military. But there is now a change of thinking that, look, we can't keep going the way that we did for decades and decades. I don't know if this change is deep enough and if it will change the direction of the country right now, but I'm pretty sure that it has to eventually. The fact is that there are regional tensions in Pakistan. There's Balochistan on the one hand, there's Gilgit Baltistan on the other. Sindh is definitely not happy by Punjabi rule. And so, in answer to your question, yes, the foundations of Pakistan will have to change. Okay, look, the national borders, I don't see them changing.
Okay.
The fact is that Pakistan has nuclear weapons, India has nuclear weapons, and there's not going to be a change of the map, at least so far as I can see. However, internally, Pakistan is on the brink of some major changes.
Okay. Hmm. Now, you talk of the disproportionate dominance of Punjabis in the Pakistani political arena. Do you think that was one of the reasons why Pakistan lost Bangladesh?
Oh, very much so. The fact is that that Punjab is really the heartland of Pakistan. In fact, um, you could joke, you could people joke about it and call Pakistan Punjabistan. In 1971, it was the military, which was Punjabi dominated, that led the assault. That in fact assaulted the Bengalis, that made it impossible for Pakistan to be democratic. Because let's remember that the majority of votes were gained by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was the most popular leader in Pakistan, if we were to count both East Pakistan and
Mm.
West Pakistan.
Mm.
And the Punjabi military spurned that. Now, of course, it was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto who was a Sindhi, but that Sindhi thought like a Punjabi. He thought in federal terms, in terms of his narrow power base, and that power base was, well, mostly in Sindh, but also in Punjab and with the military, because he subscribed to the notion of okay, being anti-India in perpetuity, being for the bomb, and holding Pakistan together. So fight the Baloch if necessary, when necessary. And so, in that sense, Bhutto was very much part of the establishment, and it is that establishment which continues to have a stranglehold on Pakistani politics even today.
Okay. Hmm. Now, another consistent theme in your thinking is that uh, obsession with religion will not take you anywhere. So, in the light of that, how do you define secularism? And can you give me some examples of countries where your notion of secularism is actually practiced?
There are many countries in the world that are secular. Europe is a prime example. Well, France is the extreme example, perhaps, where religion has no place in the national life. Religious symbols are banned. On the other hand, if you look at British secularism, that means that you are accommodative, you let all faiths be over there, and you let all of them prosper. Well, then that causes certain problems, of course, because they don't all prosper. Or let's look at India when it was secular. It no longer is, but in the time of Jawaharlal Nehru and then later, Indian secularism meant that you have different faiths practicing their religion, and that there would be no discrimination between them at the state level. On the other hand, this also meant that they could keep their own personal laws. And that was one feature of Indian secularism, which I think has turned out to be seriously problematic. The fact that Muslims could keep their own laws and that they allowed their leadership to go into the hands of those who had no uh, other program other than asserting their identity. That, I think, was tragic for the Muslims of India, and it led to the undermining of secularism. It allowed the forces of Hindutva to be aggressive, and that's what we see today.
Okay. So, do you think if uniform civil code comes into the country, making law same for everybody, would that address the issue, or would it accentuate the issue?
Hmm. If India was not outrightly discriminatory against Muslims as it is presently, if it had an image of being fair to all, irrespective of their religion, belief system, then I think a uniform civil code would be a very good idea. I think that Muslims would gain from it, but presently, it is rather obvious that Muslims are being targeted, and therefore Indian Muslims would perceive the imposition of a uniform civil code as a direct assault upon them. So, this is something that could be negotiated by a government that at least has the appearance of being fair to all those who live within India.
Okay. Now, let's start peeling it one by one. Recently, India banned triple talaq, for instance, and my understanding is that it's not there in Pakistan either. When the triple talaq law was passed, many commentators said it was an assault on the minority population. So, how do you reconcile these kind of ideological differences?
Oh, at a personal level, I think the triple talaq idea is abominable. It goes against basic human rights. It offends one's sensibilities. However, if it is seen by the Muslim population of India as being something that is expressly targeting them as a minority, then the reaction is negative. Now, this has many aspects to it, primary among which is that Indian Muslims now need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and learn that they cannot hope for being regarded as the same as everybody else if they are dedicated to bringing a 7th century legal system at work in a 21st century country. So they have to now look for different leadership. Indian Muslims have to have more activists from within their ranks who say that we must go along with the rest of the world. We cannot possibly, even if our religion requires it, and I'm not sure it requires it, we will not allow triple talaq or slavery for that matter. Slavery is not forbidden in the Quran, but today, even in Pakistan, you cannot buy a slave and keep a slave. It's against the law. So you have to move with the times.
Okay. Now, you said let's move with the times, and you pointed out to the West as some ideal examples of secularism being in action. But at the same time, all around the West, in a lot of countries, there has been a rise of right-wing leaders and governments. So, how do we explain that conundrum?
Oh, yes, but it is not just directed against Muslims or on religious grounds. I mean, look at something like Russia and Ukraine, where in Russia you have a populist dictator, Putin, and the fight over Ukraine is because Russia sees it as a part of Russia and culturally belonging to Russia. And so uh, our world is now getting fragmented and being consumed by primal identities. There was a time when the world was moving in a forward direction, and now, at least for the last 15 years, 20 years, it's been moving in the opposite direction. I mean, look at Brexit. Brexit uh, was such a bad idea. Europe was being unified. The EU was doing very well in many things, not all things. And for Britain to leave it was such a shame. So, our narrow sectarian tendencies, we see them being asserted, not just in Europe, not just in Russia, but most particularly on the subcontinent, in India, and of course, Pakistan, where it had been asserted much earlier.
Mhm. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the things from your book that you talked about before. For example, the legacy of the past leaders of India and Pakistan. There is a debate in Pakistan about the legacy of Mr. Jinnah, and so is the case in India, including Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, Bose, Patel. And in fact, I think in your book you argue that Mohandas Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru have met a similar fate in India as Sardar Patel and Damodar Savarkar found favor with Hindu nationalists. Why do you find this disturbing?
I find it disturbing because a secular universalist ideal has been sacrificed for a very narrow parochial one. And let me tell you how puzzling it has been for Pakistanis. Because, as kids, we used to learn that Nehru was, he was the enemy of Pakistan, didn't want it. And Gandhi pretended to be for Muslims, but actually wasn't. And now, as we look at the other side, and now we see Hindutva actually blaming Gandhiji for being pro Muslim and Nehru as being a Muslim in disguise. I've heard absurd stories about that. Now, all this is disturbing because of the reasoning that is being given. Look, all peoples have narratives, have myths. And the myth of India is that it was great until the Muslims came and they smashed the temples and they destroyed the civilization. And from a period of greatness, we fell to become just the slaves of the conquerors. That's false. There's such a lot of historical evidence, some of which I discuss in my book, that it's false. Now, in Pakistan, the notion that Pakistan was created when Muhammad bin Qasim came in 712 AD to Sindh, and then with his sword he conquered all this territory over here, and that's the time that Pakistan came into existence. What absolute nonsense. But that's what is taught to our children in Pakistan. And so to dispute these facts of history, I think now is important, because history has suddenly become dynamite. Instead of being just a dry as dust subject, it's something that is now influencing what we do at the present time.
Okay. Um, all right. So let's put it all in a context. I think all around the world, if we look at the rise of Mr. Trump in America, the rise of right wing leaders in Europe and elsewhere, uh, one gets the feeling that in order to be politically correct, the liberals, and they are derisively called as libtards in India, they have taken their position to such an extreme extent that the majority opinion has been kind of crushed, in the sense of, if you want to be politically correct, you shouldn't even talk about it. So it's become a kind of dinner table conversation, and these people, the so-called deplorables, will go and vote, and then we say, "Whoa, what happened? Why is this leader chosen? Why is this government in power with this kind of atrocious policies?" So, taking that context to India, let's talk about so-called minority appeasement and communal politics that people keep talking about here, particularly in the majority voice that we hear. And of course, the minorities feel the other way around. And but if you look at the kind of most potent expression of Hindus at the consecration of Ayodhya Ram temple, is it fair to say then that when Indians visit ancient temples all around the country and see defaced idols, it hurts them deeply, which is now being channeled by way of unprecedented support for Mr. Modi? You know, Many people in the country say that, hey, this is how we always felt. And now that we have a leader who is not afraid to voice that opinion, we want to go and vote for him. So, in the light of this, one may argue that it's not Mr. Modi who is creating polarization, but in fact mirroring and channeling the majority view. Can we say that in a democracy, yatha praja tatha raja, than the other?
Okay. Well, many points that you've raised over here, but what brought a smile to my face was when you said liberals. What did you call them? Deplorables, huh? Well, that
Libtard. In India, the popular term for them is libtards, liberal
okay,
retard.
okay. So that's exactly what people like me are called here in Pakistan by leaders such as Imran Khan. In fact, he calls us the liberal scum and fascist liberals and oh, God knows what else. Now the problem is that, you see, he has an Islamic vision. He wants the Riyasat-e Medina, the state of Prophet Muhammad, to come back to Pakistan, and so people like me who are liberal and secular are deeply despised by him. Now, he too is a very popular leader, and so, in spite of the fact that he's in jail, there are crowds that are demanding his release. And what do they want? Well, they want to get rid of the old corrupt uh, political leaders, and they love his promises of Islam. Now, let's say that we were to take those promises literally. What would Pakistan become? It would become an extremely backward 7th century state. It would be extracting jizya from its Hindu and its Christian citizens. And all this would be democratic, right? That's democratic. Well, majoritarian would be a better word for it. So now let's come to India. Okay, so what you said was true, that the Muslims came as conquerors. Mahmud Ghazni destroyed Somnath once, twice, thrice, God knows how many times. There were other temples that were destroyed, mosques were built on them. And this is something that now is so played upon that people get very. Mr. Modi, he has a knack for doing this, and he has a knack for telling Indians how they were brutalized by Muslim occupation. But there's another side to this story. First of all, yes, temples were knocked down by Muslims, but on the other hand, temples were knocked down by other Hindu rajas as well, and there's lots of evidence of that. And further, that Hindus knocked down Buddhist temples, which came even earlier. The whole history of humanity is a sad one. It's one of aggression, of conquest, but it's also one of cooperation, of progress as well. So consider the fact that the Muslims, even though they came as conquerors, they stayed, at least some of them stayed. The Mughals created an empire such as had never existed before. It was vast. India became India became the richest country in the world during their time. There's wonderful architecture. There's the Taj Mahal, of course, but 100 other places, 1,000 other places as well. And so not all of it was bad. And furthermore, the the times of cooperation, of coexistence, of happy coexistence between Hindus and Muslims should not be forgotten either. In fact, I can tell you that my father, who was a Sindhi living in Sindh, had as his only friends, only friends, Hindus, and he just couldn't bear the thought of partition. And in fact, my maternal uncle, after partition, migrated to Bombay and spent the rest of his life there. And I have cousins there. And so, look, everything is nuanced. And if we look at history, we see this and we see that. And look, nobody should be punished for the crimes of their forefathers. I don't know what my grandfather did or his predecessors did. They must have done terrible things, I'm sure. Why should I be responsible? I didn't commit them. I don't even know what they did. And so we have to be forgiving of excesses in the past. We have to now move on.
Okay. All right. Now, to account for Mr. Modi's popularity and continuous electoral success, purely in the realm of Hindutva, I think perhaps is a too simplistic an explanation, because most Modi often keeps talking about development politics to unify the nation. His argument is that the social welfare measures are directly reaching the vulnerable sections of the society thanks to the digital fintech revolution, reaching them straight into their bank accounts. Uh, and there is no discrimination on any ground when it comes to welfare and welfare measures. So, if there is evidence on the ground to say that all these welfare measures are reaching irrespective of people's religion or whatever. Now, in that situation, how do we account for Mr. Modi's success? Is there any place to accommodate the other side of his politics, which is the positive side?
It is admittedly his better organization of India's resources. And I think that Congress in this matter failed to do what what the BJP was able to do. On the other hand, I see that there's a huge maldistribution of wealth in India. On the one hand, one has extreme poverty And having traveled through India, I saw so much of it that was heartrending, and that was actually worse than in Pakistan in places. And on the other hand, you have these extreme concentrations of wealth. You have like this Sikh wedding, I mean, SICK, Sikh demon, um, demonstration of power and wealth, in which this Ambani fellow invites celebrities from across the world. I mean, to a country where the majority, or if not a majority, a huge 40 to 50% minority lives in a dreadful state of poverty. And look, we can't deny that that is so, because all one has to do is go to Bombay and look around, or to Calcutta and look around. And even in Delhi, where I've gone on and off, there is such appalling poverty over there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of addressing that, what one has is these super rich people who then are capable of creating the myth that all of India is prospering, when in fact only a section of India has prospered.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, at some point in time, Hinduism had spread far and wide, and to countries like Indonesia, Cambodia, and so on. Sometimes it is pointed out that look at Indonesians. They are Muslims, but they're still proud of their Hindu heritage. Their currency shows that, and so on and so forth. So the argument is, why can't Indian and Pakistani Muslims also feel that they have had Hindu heritage?
I think it's the two different ways in which Islam arrived in these two different places. In Indonesia, it came primarily from trade. And so it was the Arab traders who came there. And later on, those traders became Muslim, and they were able to spread their influence. And so it came in a peaceful way, whereas with Muhammad bin Qasim, and then with other conquerors from Afghanistan, from Central Asia, you had Islam coming through the sword. Of course, the majority of Indians were converted by Sufis, and there is no historical evidence for mass butcheries, such as, for example, the Mongols had executed. The Mongols had completely destroyed Baghdad, and I mean, what they did was a genocide. But there is no comparable um, historical evidence of mass killings. And in fact, the Muslim rulers worked through co-optation. They worked through inducing Hindus to come and be with them. So, for example, if you look even at the time of Aurangzeb, forget Akbar, but even Aurangzeb, he had Rajput generals in his army.
Hmm. Okay. All right. When we talk about India and Pakistan, Kashmir becomes front and center. The new Prime Minister of Pakistan has also talked about Kashmir in his very first address. With all the issues that are confronting Pakistan at the moment, why Kashmir still occupies front and center in terms of the strategic priorities of the Pakistani leaders?
Well, unfortunately, territorial disputes obsess countries. If you look at China and India, they're fighting over a piece of land that really doesn't matter. In the case of Pakistan and India, Kashmir does matter. For Pakistan, especially because the waters that irrigate all of Pakistan originate from there. And then, look, it's a long story of what happened at partition, how the issue of the princely states was resolved. And so, on this matter, Both India and Pakistan have their own narratives, their own cases to make. But coming to your question specifically, why is Pakistan emphasizing Kashmir at a time when it's in such distress? And my answer is it's pretty foolish to do that. Let Kashmir lie as an issue. There's not going to be a resolution by using force. Pakistan has tried thrice, 1947, 1965, and then Kargil in 1999, and it didn't work. So let's come to an understanding with India that this is an issue that can be left dormant. And so let's now focus upon trade, on letting people go from one side of the border to the other and become normal, friendly countries. Or if not friendly, at least learn to live together decently.
Mm.
Now, the fact that Pakistan does not do that is, of course, because of its army. The army has to have a raison d'etre. And what better than to say that we have a perpetual enemy on our borders? But that's not going to work for too long. It too now has started, I'd say, backpedaling a little bit. So, just to give you an example, at Islamabad airport and at various important intersections in the city, there used to be neon signs of how many days since Article 370 was abrogated, and um, the minutes and the hours from that time on, well, they disappeared. So the realization will come that we cannot keep doing what we have done for the last 76 years. I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In fact, when Mr. Modi started as a prime minister 10 years ago, it actually started on a very positive note because he took oath in the presence of all the SARC leaders, including Mr. Nawaz Sharif, at the oath-taking ceremony. So 10 years on, how do you assess the neighborhood first policy of the Modi government?
The Modi government has used the Pakistan issue as a means of propelling itself into power. It is not interested really in establishing normal relations with Pakistan. And I'd say that it's not just Modi's fault, it's also the way that Pakistan has behaved. And so, what is needed is for good sense to prevail. I think on the Pakistani side, it'll come sooner than on the Indian side because the Pakistani side is getting weaker by the day. The new government now in place has, it's gone back to the IMF. And the only thing that they expect is that they'll get a better deal this time than the previous one. But that dependence is going to stay. And given that dependence, there's only so much that the army can do.
Okay. All right. Now it's quite evident that under Mr. Modi, India has done pretty well in forging broader and deeper relationship with the Middle Eastern countries. The UAE has even built a Hindu temple and conferred on Mr. Modi the highest civilian award. He has managed to achieve this despite forging very close relationship with Israel. Um, Considering the image that he has as the Hindu nationalist leader, how has this been achieved?
Oh, actually, the Saudis or the Qataris or the UAEs, they don't have any visceral relationship or feeling with Hinduism. They see it as something far away. How Indian Muslims and Hindus relate with each other is very different. So, what you said is absolutely true. I could add to that that Saudi Arabia had given a very high award to Mr. Modi as well. For them, it is a matter of power politics. They have effectively divorced their religious preferences. And in fact, we do see that within Saudi Arabia, there's a major change that has come, and that if MBS could get his way, he would he would downplay religion even further. Now that's a sign of progress within Saudi Arabia. It does not necessarily extend to all Arab countries, but Saudi Arabia is extraordinarily important. And I should say, however, that the impact of what has happened in Saudi Arabia is not being fully felt in Pakistan as yet, but it will come in slow degrees.
Okay. That merits, I think, an entire separate discussion by itself. There is so much to discuss there. I'll just ask very few concluding questions now. Coming back to the image of India in the eyes of the world, particularly in the last 10 years or so, from snake charmer image to IT services giant to the landing of Chandrayaan 3 on the south pole of the moon, India has come a long way in the eyes of the world. In your experience, how has the worldview of India changed?
Well, in what you said was absolutely accurate that India's image has changed. And for the most part, it has changed for the better, that it is now a country that is solid technically, that its people go to Europe, to the United States, and become engineers and doctors and scientists over there. In fact, if one looks at the faculty of US universities, at the top levels, you will find Indians over there. No Pakistanis, unfortunately. And so all that is hugely positive for India. However, I should say that more and more the West, okay, the West is hypocritical, but nevertheless, it has ideals in terms of universalism and openly discriminatory laws, such as that on Muslim migration into India. All other peoples are welcome except Muslims. And that sort of thing is going badly against India. The fact that bulldozers are used to destroy uh, homes of Muslims and only Muslims, well, that doesn't play too well with the rest of the world. It spoils India's image, but forget the image, it spoils India itself. The fact is that, look, we in Pakistan used to look at India as a kind of haven, as a kind of place where, oh, everybody can live together. There are temples and mosques side by side. You have Parsis, you have Christians, you have Muslims, you have Sikhs, you have Jains, Buddhists, everybody living over there. What a nice, peaceful, tolerant society. That was the image that we had. But that image now has been destroyed by Mr. Modi, by the BJP.
Okay, all right. Again, going back to the worldview, there have been many global initiatives by the Modi government, such as climate change accord, vaccine diplomacy during COVID, and a champion of the global south. So, do you think, as a result of all of this, the world would see India as a Vishwamitra, the friend of the world?
No, it's seeing India as part of the power complex, and so part of the G8, part of those countries that are important now in terms of the size of their GNP, their population. But in terms of giving a moral example to the world, no, I don't think so.
Okay. Last question. Going forward, what's your advice to the new government in India after the 2024 elections? Uh, as a friend of the world, as a friend of Pakistan, generally as a good citizen.
Well, you seem to assume that the elections have installed Mr. Modi back in
No,
place.
no, I said your advice to the new government. It could be
Okay.
anybody's new government.
Okay. Well, it would be the same advice to any government in the world. Be fair to all your peoples. Don't look at their race, religion, color, whatever. Establish good relations with your neighbors. Don't spend money on armaments. Spend money on uplifting your people. Spend money on research. Spend money on how to save the environment, because those are the real challenges, and those are what will make a country prosperous and good in the eyes of the world, and most importantly, in the eyes of its own citizens.
Thank you, Professor Hoodbhoy. That's a very positive message, and I have no words to thank you. Despite your illness, you came forward and candidly answered all of my questions. You could have said, that's irrelevant. I don't want to answer it, but you fronted it. You've given your opinion. In fact, your whole life has been an example of having forthright views, whether the powers that be like them or not, because you feel passionately on whatever topic that you talk about. And it's been such a privilege and delight to have met you virtually, sir, and interview you. Thank you so much.
You are very kind, and thank you.